Kia ora. Hello. This week we are returning to our Medieval Guild series. If we return to the misty past, we gave an overview of the guilds and their formation. I hope to now start giving a better understanding of the structure of the guilds before moving to their place in medieval society and the impact that they had. In this episode, we are going to discuss how apprenticeships worked in medieval Europe, who the apprentices were, and the basis of the apprentice system. As always, all links and sources are down below. Before we start, there will be some important housekeeping at the end of the episode if you're interested. I really don't like to front end that information too much into the beginning of the episode, but on with the episode. If we think about the crafts today, to become a master of any profession, there is a required period of apprenticeship. Yet in the medieval period, to gain entrance into the guilds, you were required to have competency in your craft. An apprenticeship was one of the ways in which to gain that competency, instead of a pathway into that craft. Usually, a master of a profession would seek to take someone into their tutelage, and there may be many reasons for this. Typically, there were two types of people under a master's tutelage. First, and one of the most common ones, were the sons and daughters of the master. They would learn the craft, and once the master was too old to practice their craft, or that they died, that son and daughter would take over the family business. The other was the apprentice. This is offered to those that are outside the master's immediate family, either in the city or from a nearby village, looking to send their children to learn the trade. It may be an orphan that the master has decided to take on, or someone wanting to take up a trade in the guild, either a child offered to a master to be taught, or a young adult who is seeking employment. For poorer rural people, to send your children away to be an apprentice was a path towards wealth, education, upwards mobility, and most importantly, the freedom of the cities. The expectation being that the apprentice is now part of the master's household, a de facto adoption by the master. This was more than an offer to teach the apprentice the craft in exchange for their service. At times, the master left their former apprentices items in their wills. This agreement was made possible by the contract of indenture. This was written in two halves, one half for the apprentice, the other half for the master. And we will look at an example of one of those later. This is an important document for both the master and the apprentice, as it sets the terms of the apprenticeship. The contract was required to be recorded by a notary in Bologna, and in London the names of the apprentice to be recorded and displayed to the mayor and the alderman. This contract determined the duties of both the master and the apprentice, the duration of the apprenticeship, their pay, and possibly any services rendered afterwards. Apprentices could be indentured at different ages. A first set from the ages of 10 to 14 and a second set from 14 to 21. The length of the apprenticeship would differ because of this. The younger apprentices would have a longer apprenticeship than their older counterparts. Those of a younger age would most likely be that of helpers and servants within the workshop until they're old enough to learn the trade. In Bologna, the Guild of Tailors stated that apprentices younger than 10 had to serve 5 years, while those of 10 or older, only 3. By the 15th century, the ages of apprentices were raised across Europe into the late teens and early 20s. Having that the master craftsman could now have on their hands either a child or a young adult, the contract of indenture is important. Some contracts held that the master teach the apprentice the arts of the crafts, and while doing so, use minimal punishment. It was always assumed that the master would have to use some form of corporal punishment during the apprenticeship. The apprentice was to be diligent in their studies and not run away and perform all tasks, day or night, presented to them. This might lead to the apprentice being a de facto servant. The master may have been responsible to clothe, house, and feed the apprentice. Often, if the apprentice was of the younger variety, the contract with the parents may include a provision for the parents to supply a suit of clothing every year. We all know how fast young children grow, right? Some contracts specified the apprentice was to supply their own food. If not, they would have a longer tenure to pay off that debt. The apprentice might be permitted to return home once a year for visits. As the master was now responsible for the upbringing of the apprentice, they were to ensure that their charges would not go astray. Most, if not all, contracts contain the guidelines dealing with the moral conduct of their apprentice. Contracts forbade male apprentices from marriage, at least not without permission. Contracts contained promises to protect the apprentice in sickness and health. But enough of me talking about contracts. Let's have a look at one, shall we? The apprentices portion. April 13th, in the year of our Lord, 1248. I, William, Barber of Sestry, in good faith and without evocation, place myself in your service and engage myself to work for you, Armand the Barber, making my home with you for learning the art or craft of barbering for a period of 2 years at the salary or wage of 40 solidi in the mixed money now current in Marseille, promising to be faithful to you in all things, not to rob you or take anything away from you, and not to leave you for a greater or less wage for any reason whatsoever, and to give you in good faith whatever money I am able to take, to tell you the truth, and to bear faith to you in all that I do. I also promise to reimburse you for all expenses you incur on my behalf, and promise to do all these things by agreement under pledge of 100 solidi in royal crowns, the pledge being forfeited when the agreement is broken. For the greater security, I swear upon the holy gospel, touching them with my hand, and I pledge all my goods, etc., and renounce all benefits of the law, etc. Now, the master's part. And I, said Armand, admit all the foregoing and promise by this agreement to give to you, the said William, 40 solidi each year as your wage, and to promise for you in sickness or in health, food and clothing for 2 complete years, pledging all my goods, etc., renouncing the benefit of all laws, etc. These contracts were not the only things that were in place to protect the relations between the master and the apprentice. The guild also placed ordinances to regulate the master and the apprentice, such as the number of apprentices a master could take on. Too many apprentices, and this would have an impact on the guild journeymen who would not be able to find work. The guild also regulated on if it were fair that an apprentice could flee from a master, such as if an apprentice were to be enticed away by a more lucrative offer of a master in the guild would intercede. This was against guild statutes. However, if the apprentice was to flee back home, well, this was the act of children, and that was the master's problem to resolve, as it was a breach of their own contract. As we have discussed before, the purpose of the guild was to monitor and maintain the quality of the goods produced by its members. The apprentice system was one of the ways the guild was able to ensure the quality of the skills of its members was being controlled. Once an apprentice has completed their tenure, they would need to become a journeyman and register with the guild. This ensured that guild members were sufficiently trained in the skills needed to maintain the quality that was expected of its members. Well now, here we are at the end of the video. For those of you that stayed to the end, let's finish off with a bit of that promised housekeeping. We've hit the 500 subscriber mark, which I have to say we're both really chuffed about. It's an honor to have so many people interested in what we have to say. Thank you. As promised, we do have a giveaway to do since we hit the 500 mark, and we're just figuring out what we are going to do. So please stay tuned for that. We are also looking at moving our release time. At the moment, our episodes are coming out Sunday afternoon, New Zealand time. However, this means most of our viewers who are in the Northern Hemisphere get the episodes releasing in the middle of the night. So we're looking to move our release time to Saturday morning, our time, which means the episodes will be releasing Friday afternoon in the Northern Hemisphere. We will post on social media when this change will happen. Hello? Oh, you're still here. That must mean you're at the end of the video. So, I guess you'll probably want to like and subscribe. Also, remember to stay safe, have fun, and keep reenacting.